Hi everybody, welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be doing my January wrap up. I feel like I just said that really weird. Stella is in fact sitting, hanging out on my lap. She gets a haircut tomorrow. January, can I say the month? January was such an interesting month. I started off 2025 with a 6-star read, a new favorite book boyfriend, and I've kind of fizzled out and I feel very uninspired with books right now. So we're gonna talk about all of the books that I read this month. I read 11 books in total. I didn't dissect the different genres or the pages that I read, anything like that. So unfortunately, I don't have that data for you this month. I read 11 books. I did DNF a few. We're gonna talk about all of them today. As always, going to start off with the books that I read on my Kindle / listen to that I don't have physical copies of, just because if I don't talk about them first, I will forget about them. So this month, I actually read a lot of books on my Kindle through Libby from my library, and one of the books that I decided to read was Radium Girls. This is a very random book for me to choose to read, but I saw a TikTok of someone talking about the story of Radium Girls. If you don't know who they are, they're the women who are the reason we have OSHA, which protects workers in America. They were the women who were working in the dial watch factories during World War II. These women used paint that had radium in it, and the company would tell them to like lick the paintbrushes, and because of that they all ended up getting radium poisoning. Insane amounts of radium within their bodies, but also just being surrounded by it every single day. This story is the story of the women themselves, and you follow in sort of an actual like fiction way. I'm not sure if the characters that we follow in this book are fully like genuine real names of characters. That I don't know if that is fictionalized to protect some of these people, but I believe all of the names of the women in this book are the real people that went through this infuriating, heartbreaking story, but it's also such an important read to have these women's lives and stories live on. I didn't actually give that book a rating because it's nonfiction. It's more of like a historical. I wanted to read it to learn more, so no rating for that one. But if you are interested in history and just learning more, I would really recommend that story. And then this month I listened to 2 audiobooks. One I did end up DNFing, and then the other one I actually really enjoyed. So first off, with the one that I did end up DNFing, I listened to Butter. I was so excited for this book, and I think I soft DNF'd it. I might go back to the story one day, but I feel like I actually need to read the story. I don't fully know what I thought this book was going to be. I was so excited. I had a little bit of blindness because I think the cover is so interesting for the book. The story itself is about this journalist who is our main character, and she is trying to get close and kind of grow a connection with this woman who's in jail for murdering multiple men. And the one thing about this woman is that she is a chef. She is very big into food and all of those things. I'm gonna like unbutton this second one so that looks a little bit better. I was really intrigued by the story, and I thought it was going to be more murder mystery thrilling than it is. I just didn't care for the characters, and I thought the story was a little bit boring, if I'm completely honest. So I did soft DNF that one. It's kind of unfortunate that I feel that way about that book because I was so excited for that story, as well as that book was actually on my 25 books to read in 2025, and I already have DNF'd 2 books on that list. We'll talk about the other one too. The other audiobook that I listened to was again from my library. I listened to the audiobook There Is No Ethan. This book, again, so infuriating and a crazy story. If you liked the show MTV's Catfish growing up, I would recommend to listen to this. This book is about these women who had to deal with the same person catfishing them. It takes place in the like early Facebook, MySpace. I think it's Hello Cupid, if I'm remembering, was the dating site that they were all on. And it's so infuriating. Like, you see the way that this person is gaslighting these women. They're so vulnerable, and they already have a connection with them that they are just like falling for it. It's crazy, and there are so many twists in this story. You follow 3 of the women. It kind of goes in the account of each of their history with this person, and then how they all kind of figured out and found out who the actual person was. This is based off of a true story, and I believe all of the names, for the most part, are the actual names of the people who they are, which is just, it's crazy. It makes me very glad that I've kind of given up on dating in this day and age, because it just, I can't believe there are people like that out there. It's insane. Since we already brought it up, I'm going to talk about another soft DNF that I had. I had quite a lot of DNFs this month. I don't know what it is. Right now, I feel like I'm having a hard time falling into books. I feel like everything feels like hey, say the word feel one more time. Everything to me feels like words on pages versus when you really dive into a book and you kind of fall into your mind and you're not noticing that you're reading. I ended up soft DNFing Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. It was another book that was on my 25 books to read in 2025. I got it through my library, and I do think that this is a like right book, wrong time. Frederick Bachman's writing is very stylistic, and it feels like the type of writing that you want to highlight and underline and post quotes to Instagram, but I just was not in the mood for that. I do think I maybe will go back to that story, but for now it's a DNF, soft DNF, maybe a full DNF. The last book that I read on my Kindle this month is The Giver. I finally got around to it, another book that was on my 25 books to read in 2025. This is actually a lot shorter of a story than I thought it was, and I loved this book. In The Giver, you follow our main character, Jonah. In this society, when kids turn 12, they're basically given like their job that they're going to do. It's assigned based off of their personality, where they volunteer, things like that. And on the day of this ceremony, Jonah instead, is it Jonah or is it Jonas? I think it's Jonah. Instead of being assigned a normal job, the community assigns him to be the next receiver. And what that is he receives the memories of humankind. In this world, people don't know what music is. People don't know what colors are. Jonah is the only one who does. There is a movie based off of the book, and I really like the way, surprisingly, that the movie is versus the book. I think the book is a great outline for the story, but because the book is so short, it feels like it doesn't fully dive into the world. That being said, I did really enjoy the book, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5. So those are all of the books that I read in January that I do not have physical copies of, and now let's finally get into the books that I read that I do have physical copies of. These are all the books that I read this month. We are going to talk about the first book that I read this month that I gave a 6 star. This, I think, is my favorite romance story. One of my favorite romance stories. I read Daydream by Hannah Grace. I picked this up on a whim. I think I read this like New Year's Day or like a day or two after New Year's Eve. Was just in the mood for a soft, fluffy, yearning romance, and I picked this up. I honestly wasn't going to read this, but I decided to try it. I love Henry and the other books. If you don't know, this book is the romance of Henry and then also Hallie, and I have never felt so seen in both of the main characters. I think there are a lot of things with Henry that I relate to, but then there are a lot of different things with Hallie that I relate to. I loved their romance. This was such a cute book, and I also like, in my opinion, this book is not as spicy as the other books in the series. I don't know if everyone else feels the same way about that. I loved how like soft this book felt. It felt like romance is real. I don't know how to explain it. It just was the best. I loved this book. So this was the first book I read in 2025, a 6-star read. I know everyone always talks about this, but the found family-ness of this series is so beautiful. I love it so much. Love this book. Please read this book. This is my favorite book that I read this month. Then I did read 2 books from the same series, so I'm just going to talk about them at once. I ended up reading Lightlark as well as Nightbane. These are the first 2 books in this series. I believe there's 3 books out right now and that the series is still being written. If you don't know what Lightlark is about, Lightlark is this island/game that occurs every 100 years, and the rulers have to go to the island to try and win Lightlark to break their island's curse. I have to be honest, this is a YA fantasy. This series feels very trope heavy, and I wasn't excited about the series when I first heard about it. I heard a lot of low-key negative reviews about the series, so I wasn't going to pick it up, but then a booktuber that I follow really likes the series, so I wanted to give it a chance. And this is kind of the book that I started at just the headspace where I was reading, but I wasn't absorbing information. Like everything felt like words on pages, and I hate that type of reading. I love to feel like I'm in the story with the characters. And so for this book, I really didn't care about the story until the end. There is the relationship dynamic, I'll just say, of this story and in this series, I don't love. And yeah, so then I read this book because the way that this one ended, I just wanted to know what happened. And honestly, this book felt like a waste of time. I'm just gonna be honest. I don't think I'm gonna continue on with the other book. I do have access to it. My library has an audio copy of it, but honestly, like, I just don't even want to waste my time listening to the audiobook. So I think one day when the series is wrapped up, I may ask people on social media and be like, hey, what happens in this series? But I don't care enough to waste my own time reading it. Next, I actually listened to this book, but I do have a physical copy of it. I think this is the most important book that I read this month slash listened to. This is Fascism by Madeleine Albright. You do not know who Madeleine Albright is. I didn't know who she was until I read this. She was America's 64th Secretary of State from 1997 to 2001. She's held a lot of different positions within politics. This book, Fascism, directly is talking about fascist leaders. She has had a lot of direct life experience with some of these leaders. From the leader in Germany to Italy. There was one that even I didn't know about, and like, America's education system's not that great, so that's not surprising, but I don't even know how to say his name, Erdogan. But each chapter goes into basically like the history of those leaders, how they rose to power, and then how they basically took power. I'm not going to say much about this. I've been talking about this on my channel, and it's something that just will continue to have to be talked about. But in today's day and age, with everything that's going on, again, I've talked about this before, I'm whatever. It's very important to stay educated and to continue wanting to learn. Once you graduate high school and graduate college, the beautiful thing about life is that you get to choose what you want to learn, what things intrigue you, and something like this, I think, is so important to want to learn about. This book I listened to the entirety of. It's available on Spotify audiobooks, and honestly I really enjoyed that because I believe the narrator is the author herself, and it feels like you're in like a history lecture hall. I really enjoyed it. It's a very important book. Yeah, I read this book. Would really recommend it. I really enjoyed it. And then next, this was a random one for me. In 2025, I have this goal where I really want to go to more third spaces. In 2024, and honestly 2023, I spent a lot of my year hidden in my apartment, hiding away from the general public. Part of it because it's very expensive to go out and exist out of your apartment, but also partly like, people are just mean. I really yearn to be around people and to form connections with people and things like that. So I went to Barnes for like a couple weekends in a row. I would go to a coffee shop and then I would go to Barnes. And during one of those little days out, I ended up picking up this book. This is Love Interest by Claire Gilmore. Now, I'm sure you recognize the cover if you are into booktube because Haley Pham actually, I believe, rated this 6 stars. Like, she loves this book, and good for her that she loves this book. Unfortunately, I did not like this book. Not because the book is bad, not because the writing is bad, not because the characters are bad, anything like that. But from reading this book, I realized that I do not like workplace romances, because why would I want to read about work when I have to be at work 40 hours a week? Like, I think people who are going to like this book are in college or in high school. Like, people that aren't necessarily working in the workforce yet, working in an office setting yet, will probably like this book. Unless you really like workplace romances, maybe this might be for you. Beautiful quotes from this book. I'll insert one of them that I've highlighted. Loved the yearning of this person. Besides for that, I don't know. It wasn't anything memorable. Couldn't really tell you a lot about this book except for the fact that they do like some sort of YouTube series. Yeah, read this. And then, of course, this book came out in January, so I had to read Onyx Storm. I did end up getting this edition of the book. I think this is just the special edition. I don't really know. I don't stay up to date with special edition releases. I read Onyx Storm, which is the 3rd book in the Fourth Wing series. Not the Fourth Wing series. It's the Emporium. I don't know how to say the name. I can't obviously talk about what this book is about because it's the 3rd book in the series. It would spoil everything. If you've read the series and you know how Iron Flame ends off, I was very excited and intrigued for this book. I do have to say, a lot of this book did feel like repetitive and a little pointless. And I don't know if I feel that way because I didn't read this in one go. I am a binger of books. Like, I love binge reading a book in a day, in 2 days, whatever. I feel like the longer it takes me to read a story, the lower I'm gonna rate it. And for me, I took my time with this story, not because I wanted to, but because I was so busy. And I think maybe because of that, it's not rated as highly for me. I think I gave this a 3.5. I will say I have watched a lot of theory videos. You know, if you've read this, you know the ending. I'm so intrigued to see where this world is gonna go. I do want to do a reread of the books and like read them back to back to see just if there are things that I'm missing, because I didn't reread Iron Flame or Fourth Wing. So the first like 100 pages, I was just trying to remember who all the characters were. And it was a little challenging for me personally, because in the first two books, all the characters are kind of called their first name. And then in this book, everyone is called their last name. And then they would talk about the different dragons. And I was like, I have no idea who's bonded to who. I will say I really like the cover for this. And I like how if you were to line up Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, and then this in like that sort of order, it goes from like gold to burning to black. One pet peeve about this book before we move on, if she talks about, this is not a spoiler, it's just a pet peeve of the book. Someone needs to do a tally of how many times this talks about his onyx colored eyes. It didn't bother me at first, but then once I noticed it, it was like every 10 pages she says it. And then the last book that I read this month, I actually just finished this today, and this is The Empress by Kristen Cast. This is a stunning book cover. This is so pretty. It intrigued me because if you don't know, the Empress is a tarot card, and that's actually what this book is kind of based all about. In this book, this is a romance series. In this story, our main character ends up falling into a tarot card and basically goes into a different reality, a different dimension. You kind of follow the romance from there. She has to kind of save the realm, whatever. It is such a fast-paced, smutty, just unserious book. So if that is something that you don't like, I don't think that you would like this book. But for me personally, I just needed a low to no brain power book. So I did enjoy reading this book. I'm never gonna think about this book ever again though. I don't know if I would necessarily recommend it to you. I think I rated this a 2.75. If you want to read it, see if you can get it from the library. That way you don't have to waste the money on it. But if you like those sort of like trashy romance, nothing serious, they're making sexual innuendos within 5 minutes of meeting each other and saying I love you after 1 week of knowing each other, maybe you'll like this. Those are all of the books that I read in January. I hope you guys liked this video. If you've read any of these books, let me know what you thought down below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and then also follow me on Instagram. It's always linked down below. Yeah, I will see you in my next video, and until then,